I wish they'd asked me who he wanted to introduce me, because Kim would have been the last choice. Okay, yeah, I'm going to talk to you about privacy in Plone. If I can work out how to use my laptop. Yeah, great. So, as Kim says, I've been using Plone since 2005. I used to do more of it than I do at the moment, but it's quite difficult to get rid of me, especially when you have conferences in such fun places. Also, I'm not a lawyer. None of this is legal advice. Like, really, do not listen to what I'm saying and then complain if you get in trouble. Like, I've read all the relevant laws, and I know things from a UK perspective, but like, get a lawyer if you actually want to do things right, and read the stuff yourself. It's not as complex as it seems, but don't just trust everything I say, because I might make mistakes. So, when we talk about privacy in 2018, generally we're talking about data protection, because the GDPR regulations came in Europe, which are a very big update to the data protection laws of every European country. And not everyone likes this. There's a lot of people online who hate data protection for some reason. What it is, for me, is about who owns the data that you're using. Is it the person that the data's about, or the person that collected it? So, say you've got a website with lots of user profiles on. You know people's name, email address, date of birth, I don't know, height. Do you own that data because you collected it and they gave it to you voluntarily, or maybe not so voluntarily? Or do they own it because it's about them and you're just keeping hold of it and using it for your own reasons? So, as I said, GDPR. A lot of people associate this with cookies. It's not about cookies at all. Like, not even a single bit about cookies. The only stuff about cookies is an older regulation that GDPR barely changed at all. It's just that when GDPR came in, people decided to start following the older laws as well. And people now blame GDPR for these terrible banners that you've got everywhere. It's not even GDPR, it's the e-privacy regulations. I should have warned you that I'm probably going to get angry at some point or multiple points during this presentation, because I got so angry writing it, looking at all the stuff that people do, and I'm sorry if that happens. I'll try not to shout too much. But anyway, it divides opinion. There's lots of places online, like Hacker News, that you see lots of negative comments about GDPR, but personally I'm a big fan. It sounds more complicated than it is when you look at it. There's 7 principles that it says that you have to follow, and these are written in a very sort of lawyery way, because they were written by a committee of politicians and lawyers over the course of 5-6 years. But actually, they're not that complicated. The first one, lawfulness, which is that it's the law that you have to follow the law. Okay. What that means is that you have to have a valid reason for using people's data. It's hard to argue with. Purpose limitation means that if you've collected some data, you can't then change your mind about why you wanted it and just use it as though it was all fine. So, for example, say you're running an event website and you decide to ask people if they want men's fit or women's fit t-shirts. You basically know if they're men or women. You can't then say, well, one of our sponsors wants to promote their product especially to female developers, so we're going to use this data, pass it over to them, and they can do their advertising. That's just not cool. Data minimization is that if you don't need some data, you shouldn't collect it. So this is especially true of logs. If you've got really detailed logs that you never look at, but they're storing potentially private data, then get rid of them or schedule them to be deleted after a certain time. Accuracy is that you have to make sure your data is right. If it's not right, then you have to fix it. Storage limitation is lawyer speak for if you don't need it anymore, you should delete it. Integrity and confidentiality is like you're looking after someone's data. If you get hacked because you're negligent, then that's on you. You have a duty of care over this information. And finally, accountability is that you can't just palm it off on someone else saying, oh, we're just a company trying to, I don't know, sell watermelons. If you're holding people's data, you have to look after it. And from the public's point of view, you have a number of rights. The right to be forgotten is the one that people talk about a lot, but I'll go through them in order. The right to be informed is you have to be told what people are doing with your data and what data they're storing. Right of access is see what they've got. Right to rectification is if you notice it's wrong, they have to fix it. The right to erasure is the right to be forgotten, which is if they've got a load of data on you, then you can ask them to get rid of it. The right to restrict is, it's a bit of a weird one. It's, if there's a problem, you can say, just put a hold on everything. I want you to look into my problem before you carry on using my data. The right to portability is getting an export of everything they've got so you can take it to a competitor. The right to object is if they're doing something that you don't like, then you can tell them to stop it. And automated decision-making is a weird one. This is like if you're a bank and you've got a system that tells you if someone gets a credit card or a mortgage or something, and the system computer says no, then they can say, no, I want an actual person to look at it because I don't trust the computer to factor in all the conditions. One more slide of legal bullshit, and then I'll finish with that, I promise. So, the lawful basis of processing is the idea that you have to have a reason to do something, right? So, GDPR sets out a few reasons that you can store data. The one that you see most often is consent, which is that if someone says that you can do something, you can do it. But there's a bunch of other ones. Consent and legitimate interest are the main two. But they boil down really to, they said I could, I have to, or I want to, and there's no harm. Oh, by the way, this picture on the right is the jackets that they wear in raids in the UK when they go in to check people who are abusing data. I really want one of those jackets. I know so many people that want one of those jackets. If you wear that and go into a company, they will absolutely get nervous. And also, yeah, other countries are available. This is EU specific mainly. There's lots of different little issues in some countries and big issues in others. Like Australia especially has got lots of different ways that the same basic ideas are implemented, which if you're working there, you have to understand. But anyway, that's all done now. There's two main types of service, as far as I'm concerned. There are the traditional services, illustrated here by status quo. And the reason I've chosen that is that it's a pretty simple bargain. You want something, they offer it, you pay them, you get it, and that's the entire business relationship. And some examples of these are local shops or newspapers or skilled workers like plumbers or engineers or software developers or local transport companies. All these ones, you pay them the money, you get what you want. The less common ones are the ones where they kind of get their money through unseen stuff in the background, which I've illustrated here with the walrus and the carpenter, because they act like they're your friends, but then they double-cross you and steal all your data and do all sorts of horrible things. So like examples being Facebook and Google. And when you hear about like the Cambridge Analytica scandal we had in the UK recently of Facebook just being used for really awful targeting, like that wouldn't happen with a little grocery store, not because they don't have the data, although they don't, but because Facebook needs to make their money by selling your data. And they really benefit from not being in compliance with these laws. And I mean, the laws are going to hit everyone, big business, small business, no matter what, but it's these ones that really suffer from it. Oops. And when I say non-compliance, I mean things like these awful banners that I hate. This one is non-compliant. You notice it says I accept, but it doesn't have I refuse. So you might think, oh, I'll click the cross because that way I'm not accepting. But the text says, by clicking I accept or X. Like, there's no point asking for someone's permission to do something if you aren't actually asking for their permission. You're just pretending and then going to do it anyway. Like, putting that kind of thing on your website does not help you at all. All you're doing is being an asshole. This one, the Facebook one, blah, 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 personalized content, safer experience, cookies, we're going to track you on every website you visit, that kind of standard boilerplate. It says you agreed to the Facebook terms and conditions by clicking on the website, but you don't. If you never visit Facebook and you go to a website that uses the Facebook SDK, they're still tracking you. Like, you can never visit Facebook, you can never see this message, and they'll still be violating your rights. Bunch of assholes. Slack as well. Slack, this one looks nice, right? It's like, yeah, we're using cookies to better understand how the site's used. You consent to the policy, so it's not pretending to ask you, it's just telling you how it is, which is legal. It's all fine. Click to learn more, read the full privacy policy. Except when you click to learn more, they also say they do a bunch of other stuff that they don't tell you about and they don't let you object to. So it looks nice, but it's bullshit. And the worst one is Tumblr. I hate Tumblr. This is a list of over 400 checkboxes that are all default on to opt out of the individual advertisers that might track you on Tumblr. You can't click disable all. You have to scroll down. Like, mixed in with them are the more complex things of them selling data. No, fuck Tumblr and fuck everyone else who has a thing like this. And there's a lot of them. Sorry. Yeah, so what's it got to do with Plone? Back on track. We're really big on security, and we have been for years. But security and privacy are kind of two sides of the same coin. When we're looking at security, what we generally mean is protecting the data of our direct users, the people who have Plone sites. But privacy is protecting the data of their users, who are kind of also ours, because they're interacting with Plone. Like, we write features that end users want, as well as the intermediate users. So don't we have a duty of care over them as well? And all other arguments aside, like, we all use the web, we all are victims of these large companies misusing our data, and we are in quite a position of power as a large open source project. We can choose how we make our software, and if we choose to ignore privacy, then we're contributing to the problem, and if we choose to make it a big deal, then we're helping. So I made Collective Privacy. Collective Privacy is a Plone add-on that I made because one of Jazz Carter's clients wanted to improve the privacy of their website. They're an American company, but they still wanted to be GDPR compliant, which is lovely. And they actually almost entirely were. There was a couple of little issues in Plone and Facebook tracking, but they were like 95% of the way there. So they and Jazz Carter helped fund the creation of Collective Privacy. We can't just have a single like collective.gdpr that you install and suddenly you're GDPR compliant. It doesn't work that way. It's a process. You have to understand what you're doing with data and make your decisions so that you're respecting what users need. We want integrators to be able to control how the site works, really. If we just have a really prescriptive system, then integrators won't want to use it because they'll install it and say, well, like, for this one, it's kind of borderline and we'd rather have made the other decision, or we don't really like how this works. So we kind of have to strike a balance between leading people into responsible use of data and making it so that people will actually use it. So I thought, what would we have done if we'd started out making Plone respect privacy, if we had a similar sort of interface to the security system? So, of course, what would we have done? We'd have done ZCML. I did actually, for about 3 hours, consider doing like a portal tool with like adding the persistent stuff in the ZMI just to like really feel like it was 2004 again, but no, ZCML is bad enough. So this add-on, Collective Privacy, creates a new ZCML declaration, which is a data use category, and you give it a name and a title and a description. The title and description are user visible for when they want to see what you're doing. The titles, the name's like the ID, so you can access it in code. And it has these three little weird bits at the bottom: the legal basis, identifier, and storage. The legal basis is what I was talking about earlier, of like, are you doing this because you've got their consent? Are you doing it because, well, one of the things is called vital interest. And vital interest means if I don't do this, someone might die, which, lawyers. But you put in why you're doing it, because some things you're doing because it would help you, and you've asked someone's permission and they say it's fine. Some things you're doing because if you don't do them, then it's impossible to comply with some other law, right? GDPR is not as restrictive as people on American websites make out. Sorry, Americans, but it's always Americans. It's really like flexible for when you just have to do something. The identifier is, well, if you're storing data about someone, then obviously they've got all these rights, right? So if you're storing a mapping of email address to whether they've opted in or out of various emails, then they might feasibly want you to get rid of their email address. But if you get rid of the email address, then how do you know they've opted out? So you've got this chicken and egg situation. And the answer to that is you just use one-way hashing like we would do in plenty of other things. So the identifier here says if you're going to be storing someone's data, what kind of data is it, and how do you get from email address to the identifier that's in the back end. And storage is how do you store the information. So, guarding code with checks. This is an example email validator for the Plone send-to form, which is one of only about 2 places that I've spotted in core Plone where we're just actively not compliant with GDPR. With send-to form, the idea is that you go onto a page and you're like, oh, my friend would really like this. I'll go in and put their email address in, and the Plone site will send an email for me, which is a lovely feature, but it involves you taking someone's email address without their permission to send something on your website, which is probably fine because you're not doing it on a large scale, and like someone has actively said that they're probably interested, but like you don't actually have their permission, so you've got to handle the case where they come back to you and say, actually, I don't want you to send me these stupid emails. So what this does is, if there's a data use category for the send-to form that I've created, and it just checks when you're putting an email in, has this email already objected to getting these emails? And if they have, then it raises an error, and if not, great. And then there's also a little bit of stuff where it adds opt-out information to the bottom of the emails that are generated. The add-on also creates a privacy settings control panel, which is honestly probably like the weakest bit of it at the moment. It's just a very basic auto-generated form that is not the most usable thing, and if you're not careful, you end up with the Tumblr-style 400 checkboxes that nobody wants, but we're getting there. Also, it can do a consent banner, popping up the awful thing at the bottom. I don't like those, because generally, if you're popping up a banner, that means that you really, really want someone to do something that you can't justify just doing. So it's probably a little bit evil. So, I don't know. But, I don't know. If you want to use the consent banner, this thing will generate them for you, and it will generate properly compliant ones rather than the I accept that accepts no matter what. Actually, another thing about those consent banners is there's an obligation to get specific, active, informed consent. And these banners generally do at most one of them. Specific means that you've told them exactly what you want to do. So if you say, we want to collect your browsing data for nebulous purposes, that's not specific consent. Active means they have to have specifically done something to say yes. It's not fine to say, oh, well, you ignored the banner, therefore you consented. And informed is they have to understand the implications. So if you say, well, we're going to track you, you have to click here to allow that, or you can click no if you don't want to, and we might pass it on to partners. And you don't realize that passing it on to partners means that you're going to go into a massive database and be tracked, then that's not good enough either. But it's because it does everything separately and uses the information you've given it, It's a bit better. So I thought it would be fun to look at the kind of thing that you might do in a Plone site and see, well, how would you implement this using collective privacy? And the example I picked was automated machine translation. So say you've got a website in English, but you know you get a small number of visitors from basically every country in the world. And you don't want to pay to translate all of your site's UI into every language, and you don't want to pay to translate all the content into every language. So you think, I'll use Google Translate. You've got a slight problem, because if you include that Google Translate JavaScript on your page, suddenly Google is aware of every single navigation to your page. Like, someone visits it, they know their IP address, they know what page they're visiting, they know what time it is. And if they click Translate, obviously they also get the contents of the page and a bit more information. But if you do it on the server side, that's a lot of work to hook in a translate step into, I don't know, maybe a middleware or something else. Significantly more than just inserting a JavaScript snippet. Plone Multilingual does have a bit of this, but it's not quite there. So, how would you do that? Would you go for the privacy invading option that is really easy and cheap, or would you go for the really difficult thing that doesn't invade users' privacy? Well, it's not about never invading privacy, it's about making sure the user has a choice and you don't force them into things that they wouldn't otherwise want. So what I would do is I'd do it on the client side with that nasty little Google snippet. But what I would do is make sure that it was a consent-driven thing. So I would have a translate button at the top of the page, probably using the language thing that lots of websites like Wikipedia use, the little logo of various letters, which everyone understands means translate. Have that on there, and once they click it, then you can say, this involves letting Google know where you're on our site. Is that okay? And if they click yes, then fine, you can load the translate stuff in. It's a bit more of a nuisance for the people that want that, but it's not much, and it saves everyone else from having their privacy invaded by default. So what we'd do is we'd create a data use category, same as we've done previously. We'd say that we wanted to store the data in cookies, because again, it's fine to use cookies. That's not a GDPR thing. And that way we don't have to store user accounts or email addresses or IP addresses to try and identify the user on the server. That's a blank page. Why is that a blank page? Ah, there we go. Yeah. Oh, who knows what could show up? It's HTML. Yeah, so we drop into our Diazo theme the little JavaScript snippet from Google to say we want Google Translate. But I've here wrapped it in a div, even though Paul has told me not to use divs for anything. I think that this is okay, with an ID on it. And the idea of that is just so I can grab hold of it in Diazo. Then I set up a parameter in my manifest CFG saying I want you to call the portal privacy tool and check if the user has consented to this data use category that I created previously. And then I add a Diazo rule that says I'm going to drop this if the user hasn't consented. So it's really minimal impact in your site. It's the kind of stuff that an integrator or themer would be able to do really easily. I mean, yeah, it's ZCML, but we're always going to have some ZCML. This is the kind of thing where you do want to be clear to people that there's a benefit of clicking it, but it's really a big difference. Just not having it on by default, there's not much of a change in the interface, and people get a much better experience at the end. So behind the scenes, we've got three types of storage. There's the cookie storage, the ZODB storage, and the no-choice storage. The cookie one is for pretty much anything that's session-based, so things like tracking or advertising or this translate thing. Anywhere where you potentially have users who aren't a member of your site, who are just passing through. ZODB is one for when you are storing information, so it's about a specific user on the site, or it's about a specific IP address or a specific email address. And that has a couple of advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that you can always check if that user has consented to something. So if you're running a periodic task like sending out a workflow email, you can check, has the person I'm going to email this consented or refused these emails? Whereas if it's stored in a cookie, you can't do that unless the user is actively loading a page at that time. The disadvantage is that it doesn't work in all situations, because if the user hasn't given you their email address, you can't look them up. If they haven't signed in, you can't look them up by user ID. And the no-choice storage is one that's not going to be used very much, but it's for situations where the user can't say no. And there are some of those, like I mentioned earlier. If saying no could cause someone to die, you're allowed to say that they aren't allowed to say no. If you need the information to comply with various laws, or like, if you allowed people to delete their log entries, then you can't look for if they've tried to hack into your website, that kind of thing. Like, you're allowed to say no to these. If you weren't allowed to, all these rights that people have are not absolute. There's always going to be situations where they work, situations where they don't. There's actually quite a lot of clear information about that online, despite what you hear on some blog posts. But if you think about it, if you were just always allowed to say, you have to delete my data, then you could tell the police you wanted your criminal record deleted, or you could tell the hotel that you wanted your bar tab deleted. These things are just clearly not true. The cookie format's pretty simple. Again, yeah, everyone thinks cookies are a problem with GDPR. It's the tracking cookies that are a problem. That's cookies where you can identify a user uniquely from the cookie. So if you set a session cookie, that's a tracking cookie, because you know that session cookie always means this user. But this isn't identifiable. This is just a list of their choices. This is, have they said yes to the translation? Have they said no to analytics? So analytics is actually the other one of the two things in Plone that is potentially a problem, because you have to give people the choice to opt out of being tracked, and we've got the site analytics box, and we don't allow people to say no to that. Yeah, the ZODB one is a bit more complicated. The way I'm doing this is with hash functions. So you put in an email address, it hashes it, and you can store that fine, because again, that's not identifiable. If someone hacks into your site and gets all the privacy information out, they've got a list of hashes, and they can't use that to recover email addresses. And it also means that, for example, if someone requests their information is deleted, you can still store a hash of that request, so that if you're restoring from a backup, for example, you can check against that to say, oh, I shouldn't restore this record because it has to be deleted. Does anyone here know about UUID 5? Hands up if you've used UUID 5? UUID 4? Yeah, UUID 5 is bloody lovely. I love UUID 5. It's UUIDs all the way down. So UUID 5 takes a UUID, which can be a UUID 4, and a value, and then it hashes the value and combines them. So it's a namespaced hash. So you can, from this UUID that it generates, you can tell that it's an email address, but you can't tell what the email address is, but you can verify if you've got the email address that it matches. Which is a lovely little thing for this kind of thing. Yeah. I got really excited about this because UUIDs can be stored as numbers, and I thought, like, Zopi is really efficient for integer B trees. I can just do all this with an IIB tree and I'll be really happy, but UUIDs are far too long for the ZODB to handle as an int, so yeah. Sorry, that was just an aside. There's other countries, as I mentioned. If you're outside of the EU, then it might be that you have different choices about whether or not you can store somebody's data. So, for example, we've got these, I think, 5 like consent, saving lives, contract, that kind of thing. Your country might have another one that's you can store stuff if it's, I don't know, if you collected it more than 10 years ago. So you can create your own legal basis. You can do a really simple one which just defines whether someone can object or delete or export their data, or you can do a much more complex one with functions and all sorts of magic. But yeah, this add-on's not finished. It's in use on one website at the moment. but it's being actively worked on. There's some things that are missing. At the moment, you can't ask it to delete data or export data. There's a framework that's kind of in place for that. Like, I know what shape it's going to be, and I've got some of the code committed, but it's not working yet. And it's also a bit more complex. Again, this is one of the differences between the EU and Australia, which also has very strong privacy laws. In the EU, if you are storing data on behalf of someone, like say you run a cloud service, and that person approaches you saying, I want my data out, you are obliged to say, not me, go talk to my client, they're the one who controls your data. In Australia, it's the other way around. If you're running a cloud service on behalf of a client and they come to you saying, I want the data that your client is storing about me, you are obliged to export it. So it's impossible to do these things in a perfect for everyone way, but I want a framework that allows you to build what you need. Also, when we think about these exports, like I don't know, exporting all the actions that you've done on a Plone site, it's really important to offer that, but when someone comes to you saying, I want my data, they want all of the data, not just the data that happens to be in the Plone site. So if your client has got a bunch of filing cabinets in the office, then they also have to get the data out of that as well. So we have to have a system that allows you to, for example, generate an email that goes to someone in the office saying this person wants all their information, or like WordPress does, allows an admin to log in and say, I want to pull the Plone stuff out to put it together into the email that I'm sending over with all the data. Also, you have to be really careful about being sure that the person that you're dealing with is actually the person, because otherwise you have some American, it's always Americans, sorry, cause a fuss on Twitter. So this person, who apparently is a professor at some university, got really upset that Spotify exported all her data for her when she asked them to, saying, well, what if my account had been hacked? Then they'd have all my data. I mean, Spotify's already got all your data. Surely the problem is that they've stored this huge amount of really detailed stuff about, like, when you listen to what song and how much of it you listen to, and if you skipped back and forth in the song. They don't need all that, but apparently the problem is that they will export it if you ask them to. So you need to be very careful that you design a process where you are making sure you're doing the best thing for the user rather than just the easiest thing for you. And as I say, yeah, the user interface is pretty bad. It could do with some work. And there are some more general problems. For example, the predatory tech giants, people like Facebook and Google, who really don't want this to happen. Like, the people making these consent banners that are non-compliant are not doing it accidentally. They're doing it because they don't like these laws. They don't want to find it more difficult to get their revenue source. The really tricky one for me is Google Ads. Google Ads has done a fair bit, actually, to make it possible to be compliant, but it's still not all the way there. So with Google, you can tell them as part of your include for the advert, I don't want this user to be tracked. And they will refuse to show adverts that track the user, and they'll make sure that they don't store any information about them. What they do is send a cookie saying how many times you've seen the advert, which is kind of okay-ish. Like, it's not really an invasion of privacy, but it's difficult to say, well, you can opt out of the adverts, but we're still going to store cookies about what adverts we've shown you. It's borderline. And the other one is things like Facebook social login. If you want to do login on your website with someone like Facebook, because it saves time, it's great, but it means that everyone has to have a Facebook account to log in, and it means that Facebook can tell whenever someone goes to the login form. So it's tricky to come up with something that works in all situations and doesn't completely destroy the company that you're working for. I mean, it's always going to be a bit of a give and take between what the ideal situation would be and what you would like to do. But I think we have an obligation as web developers to think not just about the person that's paying us, but the people who are going to be using the software that we create. Another problem is apathy. GDPR started being written in 2012. It was finalized in 2016. And when was the first time people heard about it? We should have been aware of this years ago. This is one of these situations where I look back on 2 years ago, and I'm honestly a little ashamed that I didn't think it was as big a deal as it is, because these laws have been around for a while. Like, there's been not quite as strong, but pretty decent data protection laws in Europe since, I think, 95 was the one that became quite close to this. And we're making systems that process people's data every day, and the fact that we don't ever think about, well, would they actually want us to do this, is a bit shameful. So I think it's something that we need to get over our apathy, and we need to help our clients get over their apathy. And yeah, the FUD. There's so many blog posts online of GDPR is terrible, GDPR means that you can't do anything, GDPR means who knows what. It's just, a lot of it is bullshit. And a lot of people have read this and believe it. They think it's impossible to comply with GDPR, when I've got clients who are compliant without even really trying. They built a site that doesn't do nasty things to people, and it's already compliant. And there's a few little things, but it's not that difficult. Anyway, how am I doing for time, Kim? Oh, questions? Dylan, do you want a microphone? Yeah, do some work. Come on. No, take it to him. Yeah.
Sorry, just to repeat, Plone puts, when you do user login via email, then it puts the user ID as the email address. That's a really bad idea, right? Are we getting rid of that?
I mean, it's not a really bad idea, and it is allowed. It's just that you have to make a decision. So you have to think, is the fact that I require a user's email address invasive? It really depends on the site you're doing. If you're doing a company website where the people who log in are the staff at your company, it's not invasive at all. If you're doing a website for, for Tumblr, no. For like a medical condition support group, then people might be very scared about the fact that they are associated with this medical condition being associated with their email address. So in that situation, you definitely wouldn't want to allow it. So yeah, you've got to work a bit to decide like where the cutoff is. I mean, it's the same for like security and accessibility and usability and things. All of these requirements kind of butt up against each other in some places, and privacy doesn't override everything, and the rights are not absolute. The important thing is that we try to do our best for our users. There was another one, was there? Yeah. Question?
Yes, another part of this GDPR is the security by design. Mm-hmm. So did you come upon some, good ways of doing that based on the assumption that we're using a Plone system? I guess it's not that hard, but...
there's lots of bad habits that we've got because we're a 17-year-old framework. We log a lot of stuff and just keep the logs lying around that we don't really need to. And that's kind of more the data minimization than the security by design. But generally speaking, like, we need to just think about what we're doing with people's data and can we get rid of it when we're not using it.
Okay. Yes, just a little supplementary. We have hundreds of thousands of patients with full profiles in our system with everything you can imagine about imaging and description of diagnosis. And all this, we of course have to comply a lot with also with GDPR, but we were helped ourselves by simply having projects where we are becoming audited. And then somehow this GDPR was not so hard to come through, because we had the background of having a lot of things approved during the last 10 years. So this was kind of an extra thing on top, but it helped very much having, the authorities having to audit us. Then somehow we were driven through the process in a good way. So I could recommend everybody, I mean, take on projects where you really go for projects where you know it's hard, because that's the best way to learn. And I would say that European authorities are really helpful in making you compliant in the end. I think it's much harder if you're doing projects where you more feel alone when you're doing it, and where you're not pushed through the process.
On what's your...
No, that wasn't a question.
Thank you. Any questions? Phrased as a question? Okay, we're done? Okay, cool. Thanks.